So I basically got into vintage through a friend of mine who I grew up with, and we always kind of bought the same clothes as far as our style. And I was looking for a new direction to go in with my style. And he said, have you ever thought about some of the old clothes that we grew up with? So I just reflected on my past, and it just kind of brought me into a vintage market that I didn't know existed. As a collector of the vintage world, it's increased greatly over the past few years. So maybe 10 years ago, it was a lot more easy to acquire like t-shirts and just in general vintage items. But with the market becoming so in demand and a lot of people becoming more familiar with vintage clothing, it's become a lot more difficult to find stuff, but consistency is always the key to anything. So I'd say staying consistent, you'll always be able to find something cool within the vintage realm. So I'd say one of my most memorable moments would be a polo jacket, because I'm into Ralph Lauren polo, and there's a dollar sale they have every Sunday in West Hollywood, and I found a really nice polo jacket, and it was only $1, and I was actually able to sell it for about $1,200. So that was a pretty nice resale item, and I would say that'd probably be like one of my coolest finds. But I mean, I've found so many things over the years that to rank them would be kind of difficult, but I'd say that'd probably be my top item. So criteria, identifying vintage, well, most vintage is made in the USA. So when you see pieces made in the USA, it's usually a signifier that it's vintage. But to be specific with, you know, something such as a t-shirt, if a t-shirt is missing the tag and you're trying to identify what era that t-shirt was made, the way that you're able to do that in vintage is it's called a single line stitch. So the stitch will be one single line rather than two. If you look at the way garments are stitched now, t-shirts, they're stitched with two seams rather than one. So one way to identify vintage t-shirts is if it's single line stitched. With the fast fashion and mass production, the incentive for vintage at this point is a go green and more sustainable way of life. And I think people are drawn to vintage because of that. As it becomes more popular, people want to step away from a carbon footprint. And I never really thought about that until I became more involved in vintage and knowing that I'm doing something also to help the planet. So I think that's a driving force in the popularity of vintage as well. So I think that's a good thing. Yeah, as far as pricing, pricing is very kind of based on the buyer, I would say, because some people just want, you know, something just cool and vintage, and they might want to spend $10 or $15 on a t-shirt. And then you have some buyers that want more exclusive vintage, and it can go upwards in, like I said, the polo jacket for $1,200, or a vintage pair of Jordan 1s for maybe $3,000 or $4,000. So it's all based on the market, and to find out how much these items are worth within the market, you can use platforms such as eBay, such as Mercari, and there's just various other platforms you can utilize to sell vintage. So the pricing is kind of based on whatever the buyer's willing to pay.